What's up guys, welcome to Play Infinite. In this video I'm going to be comparing the Nexus 10, the iPad 4th generation, and the Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1. Today's October 31st and Google has just recently unveiled the Nexus 10, and the iPad 4th gen was unveiled a couple weeks or 1 week ago, and the Galaxy Note 10.1 was quite a few weeks ago or even a month ago or so unveiled. Anyways, I'm going to go over the display, the processor, the cameras, the pricing, a bit on the dimensions, the weight, things like that, the battery life, and then finally conclude it all with the availability and, like I said, pricing and what you'll be getting for your price. So first off, let's start off with operating system. The Nexus 10 is powered by Android version 4.2 Jelly Bean. It's the latest version of Android. The iPad 4th gen is powered by iOS 6, again the latest version, and the Galaxy Note 10.1 is still stuck on Android 4.0. It still hasn't reached Jelly Bean version 4.1. Not sure when it'll be updated to 4.2. In terms of display, the Nexus 10, like the name suggests, is a 10.05 inch display. It's a PLS LCD display with a pixel density of 300. The iPad 4th generation is a 9.7 inch display. It's an IPS display LCD and it has a PPI of 264. 10.1 is a 10.1 inch display. Again, like the name suggests, it's a PLS LCD display and has a PPI of 149. So in terms of display, the best display out of all three of them is the Nexus 10. The iPad has a Retina display, of course, but the Nexus 10 kind of surpasses that Retina display mark the Apple has set of 264 PPI, and they went one step further with the 300 PPI, which means that you'll be seeing better quality images, text, especially text. And that translates to a resolution actually of 2560 by 1600 for the Nexus 10, 2048 by 1536 for the iPad 4th generation, and 1280 by 800 for the Galaxy Note 10.1 tablet. In terms of processor, the Galaxy Note 10.1 is a 1.7 GHz Exynos 5 dual-core 5250 CPU, and the iPad 4th generation is on par with as a dual-core A6X CPU actually, and we're not sure, but it might be clocked at 1.3 GHz, and the Galaxy Note 10.1 is a 1.4 GHz Exynos 4 quad-core CPU. So in terms of pure processing power, the Galaxy Note 10.1 kind of wins it here. However, that's known for being a really sluggish tablet, so you might want to keep that in mind when making your purchase. And remember, at the end of this video I'm going to kind of narrow it down to two options for you guys. You might already know which two options I'm going to pick, but I'm going to narrow it down to two options, and maybe I could kind of give you a better sense of what to purchase. Anyways, memory, there's the Galaxy I'll start off with the Nexus 10 will have 2 gigs of RAM. The iPad 4th generation only 1 GB of RAM, and the Note 10.1 is once again 2 GB of RAM. So I just want to say that if you're looking for the most smoothest tablet, it will be between the Nexus 10 and the iPad 4th generation. With Android Jelly Bean, Google has really stepped things up in terms of smoothness, fluidness, so the Nexus 10 is really on par with the iPad 4th gen. I may argue that the iPad 4th gen and iOS 6 is more smoother and more silky smooth or fluid than the Nexus 10's Android 4.2. Anyways, let's move on to storage. The Nexus 10 has 16 GB and 32 GB options available. The iPad 4th generation has 16, 32, or 64 GB variants available, and the Note 10.1 has 16, 32, and you can also expand it with a micro SD card slot, so that's an advantage that you'll be getting with the Note 10.1. In terms of ports, the Nexus 10 has a micro USB, a micro HDMI, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. The iPad 4th generation only has its Lightning connector and a 3.5mm headphone jack, and the Note 10.1 has a micro SD and a micro USB along with the 3.5mm headphone ports. In terms of front-facing camera, the Nexus 10 is 1.9 megapixel. iPad 4th gen is FaceTime HD. I think it's around 1.2 megapixels, and the Note 10.1 is again 1.9 megapixels, on par with the Nexus 10. And remember that the Nexus 10 is actually branded by Google but manufactured by Samsung. The rear-facing camera for all three of the devices are 5 megapixels, and in terms of what features you can get or cellular radios or variants, the Nexus 10 will be only available in Wi-Fi at launch, and you can buy it unlocked directly from Google Play Store. The iPad 4th generation, it has an optional LTE model, or you can just get the standard Wi-Fi only, and the Note 10.1, once again, the international version only has an optional HSPA Plus model. In terms of Wi-Fi, it's pretty much standard there, A, B, G, and N for the iPad 4th generation, whereas the other two tablets have 802.11 B, G, and N. They all have Bluetooth 4.0. They all have an accelerometer, gyroscope, so gaming should be fine on all three of these tablets. And in terms of battery, the Nexus 7 has a 9,000 milliamp hour battery. The iPad 4 has a 10-hour battery life, and the Note 10.1 has a 7,000 milliamp hour battery. So in terms of battery life, you'll be getting the most out of the Nexus 10 and iPad 4th generation. In terms of dimension, let's move on to dimensions, weight, and things like that. So the thickness of the Nexus 10 is 8.9 millimeters, whereas the iPad 4 is 9.4 millimeters, and once again the Note 10.1 is at 8.9 millimeters. So they're very two thin tablets, and the iPad 4 is actually a really thin tablet itself. 9.4 is actually pretty good for a tablet. However, the Nexus 10 just beats it by a couple millimeters actually, so at 8.9. In terms of weight, the Nexus 10 is 603 grams, iPad 4 is 652, and the Note 10.1 comes in the lightest at 600 grams. Before I move on to pricing and availability, I want to mention that the Note 10.1 kind of has an advantage when it comes to note taking. Of course, that's where the name even comes from. It does have a stylus that's built in directly, and it has a lot of interface features that the other tablets don't offer. Sure, you can get a stylus for the other tablets. However, the Note 10.1 was made specifically for the stylus. However, it is very laggy. I was told that it's laggy, and you want to keep that in mind as well. The iPad sure is it's more of an ecosystem. It has a really nice ecosystem. If you have a Mac, if you have an Apple TV, if you have like a different Apple products, or even an iPhone, it's really easy to sync things between the two, or between whatever devices you have, get iCloud up and running and things like that. And the Nexus 10 would be for Android lovers, basically people that want to customize their device. So that's just what I think each device is for. So now let's finally move on to pricing. So the Nexus 10 will be available for $399, that's a 16GB model, and $499 for the 32GB model. The iPad 4 is $499 for the 16GB and $599 for the 32GB. So you can see already there the iPad 4 is expensive by $100 more than the Nexus 10. And it keeps on going. It's $699 for the 64GB Wi-Fi model, and $629 for the 16GB 4G model, $729 for the 32GB 4G model, and $829 for the 64GB 4G model. And the Note 10.1 is $499 for 16GB Wi-Fi and $549 for 32GB Wi-Fi. So you can see that the Note 10.1 and the iPad 4 are actually really comparable in terms of pricing. But the Nexus 10, no matter which way you look at it, is cheaper than both those tablets. And finally, let's move on to availability. The Nexus 10 will be available on November 13th, 2012. The iPad 4 will be available on November 2nd, 2012. And the Note 10.1 is now available, so you could purchase it if you want. So which of these three tablets should you get? Well, I'm actually not going to pick one for you. I'm going to narrow it down to two options. The rest is actually up to you. Take what I said in this video, and I guess I hope it assists in making your purchase. So I would say it should come down between the Nexus 10 and the iPad 4th generation. However, if you really want a stylus, if you want to write, then I would say go for the Note 10.1, but that's the only reason you would go for it. Besides that, I would not recommend the Note 10.1 to anyone. It would only be between the Nexus 10 and the iPad 4th generation. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Playing for more coverage on all three of these tablets, successors, the future iPads, future Nexus devices. I will keep you guys posted. You can also check out my in-depth videos on the Nexus 4 smartphone and on the iPad mini and different devices like that. I didn't put that into the comparison, but you can check out those videos as well. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Playing for more coverage, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.